So, David, other than being a year older now, and we won't divulge your age on the podcast, we're just going to say that you are a year older within a recent.
I'm a year closer to death.
Yes. Do you have any existential crises this weekend?
I don't think that I go through one weekend without a pretty decent
I just
existential
realized
crisis.
I put that in the plural, by the way.
Right.
Crises. You have
Crises.
multiple.
Well, I've had some, yes, of course, throughout the week as well. But no, the one that hit home the most is like, it was almost like a death of childhood.
Yeesh.
Yeah, it was like the things that used to make me happy don't make me happy anymore. Like, like I used to enjoy, smiling and.
Hold on, let's paint it. You're good at this, so I want you to do more of it. Paint a picture. Tell the listeners, where this came from and what conclusions we reached out of it.
Okay, well, we have a tradition for my birthday is to travel out of town to go to a water park that will remain unnamed, even though if they throw
you'll never find us in SA.
If they if they want to throw us some Finskys, we'll throw their name out there. But anyway, so we're having a great time. It's a tradition we do every year, like I said, and we're just having a ball. Get in there. It's like we had it figured out this time. It's like everything's going so smoothly. Everyone's smiling. The sun's out. The birds are chirping. Everything's going well. And I'm not getting there. It's like when you realize when you're in it, like you're not going to get the climax that you want. It's like, well, what am I doing this for? Am I just sticking around? But you know what? Let's save it. So there's this gigantic slide.
Back to the picture, please.
There's this gigantic slide that has a trapdoor drop, and it's like a 3-story straight down drop, whatever it is. So it's
very exhilarating.
It should send you into orbit,
which will play well into the picture.
So like the heart beating and all that good stuff, and like
really gets the juices of life flowing.
Right, like you should have that natural like preservation of life inside you, and I think the trap floor dropped. I was about 15 feet down and realized my childhood was dead. Because I didn't get any of that. I didn't get the heart flutter. I didn't get the butterflies in the stomach. I had nothing. I was like, oh, so that's just over. So life is just paying my taxes.
Trying to balance out pain with pleasure.
Hedge my mortgage, get a lien on my house. That kind of stuff.
To avoid insanity.
All the good fun stuff.
And then I guess slowly ease into a 6-foot hole.
Right, and slowly degrade until I am nothing but worm food.
Oh my God. So that was it. You didn't feel anything, and then all at once a massive rush of consciousness came flowing to you.
This is mortality. Like my mortality met me 15 feet down on the thunder plunge or whatever it's called.
Maybe your mortality, to quote the great American philosopher Dan Cummins, is a superficial concern for the expiration of your meat sack.
Right.
Not necessarily that. What really truly is you, the essence of your being, whatever that energy force is, whether it's called a soul or whatever.
Right.
That could go on past it, but it sounds like your consciousness went to the dark side of it.
Right. Like this is the
lights are just going to go out and it's darkness forever.
The inevitable march towards death.
I think you need to look on the bright side of life.
Just smiling on the way down. But anyway, so I didn't know if it was just a one-off, so we went back up and did it again, and it was even less lackluster. Like, are you good? Are you finished?
On the second try,
okay, because I'm not into it, so I'm gonna go now.
I think on the second try you were too much in your head. I think the first time it happened to you, it was a genuine like I said, an existential sort of questioning of your being. I think the second time you were trying to overcome it.
This is what life is now. That's it. All the good stuff's over.
Oh man.
But anyway.
Well, I don't know how that can't possibly leave you with nothing but an uplifted feeling about the rest of the episode.
I mean, if you view it through a certain life, then you're not scared of anything. I mean, you're true. It's only after you've lost everything that we were free to do anything.
That is true. I actually came across a quote recently, which I'm gonna try to steer this back onto the bright side for the listeners.
Okay.
Is that okay?
By the way, that was from Fight Club. Tyler Durden.
Oh. Totally over my head. So this conversation reminds me of, I think it was Carl Jung. If I'm misattributing this, whatever, tell us in the comments who it actually was. But the concept it was, if you die before you die, then when you die, you never die. And what he was referring to was the ego, because what you consider as you is based on your ego of how you perceive yourself within the rest of the world, right? But if your ego dies, if you come to this realization that you are not your ego, that you're some sort of force, whether you call it a soul, whatever you call it, if you realize that, so your ego has a death, then when you actually die, you realize that you don't die. Right. Because it's your ego that's gone. It's not the essence of who you are.
Right.
So if you die before you die, then when you die, you don't die. I think is a brighter, as that glass half full way to
even
look
though
at this.
It feels like you said died too many times.
I know.
But you said it the exact time. But like the first time you hear it, it's like, hold on.
Let this be a lesson to the listeners. Don't listen to these podcast episodes on that 1.5 speed. I know all you people out there do that to try to squeeze more podcasts into your life. You got to listen to us on 1 speed.
What I learned over the weekend is you got to enjoy the small things, because like take your time, savor it, because you never know when all of a sudden that thrill for it is going to go away.
Yeah. So, hey, listen, maybe you had a death of the ego and now you can live truly free, realizing who you truly are.
Perhaps. Maybe I've woken up.
Maybe yesterday was the first day of the rest of your life, buddy.
Maybe. Let's hope. Bright eyes, full hearts can't fail.
I'm pretty proud of us. We squeezed a lot of information into this intro.
Well, brevity's never really our strong suit now, is it?
No, it's not. But in the instance of that, considering we probably have a bit of a doozy ahead of us today, should we jump in?
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction podcast, episode 60.
60 for
We're getting there, baby.
Listeners at home.
Which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/60. That's the website. You can find this episode specifically to listen to and our entire back catalog. But you can also jump on the email list there, stay in contact with us that way, and you can also support the show. But other than the website, you can get our episodes on YouTube. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. You can also get us on, or stay in contact with us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc. So, David, episode 60. What are we talking about?
It's the Gmail Chronicles.
The episode that we've been teasing the listeners of since episode 0.
Yep. Since the first one that we didn't
teasing them of, teasing them with. Sorry.
We put a teaser out there.
I don't know.
We're not good with foreplay. We're like that guy that does like an hour long before, she's tapping you on the head. You got to get back up there.
Okay, bringing it back to the more PG side.
I thought I kept that pretty PG.
You, dear listeners, are the playful little cat, and we are the little the person holding the cat teasing thing that has the little thing
mouse
that dangles.
The little mouse. On
yeah,
the string?
And the cat jumps up and swipe at it. Yeah,
I got you.
Yeah. We're that.
It's a good analogy.
And you're the cute kittens.
Cool cats and kittens.
Yes, today's episode is the grandma episode. So, if you're new here, I want to tell you to put this episode on pause right now. Go back and listen to episode 0, because that was David and I's kind of I wouldn't say unrehearsed, but our kind of off-the-cuff explanation of who we are, our family experience, why we look at the world the way we do that might be unique to some other people. Episode 0, the last origin story, that's where we kind of give you some of the contextual background to what you're about to hear in this episode. But we promised then, and it's taken us 59 episodes, 60 episodes to deliver on, is that we would have Grandma on as the first ever interviewee on this podcast to basically tell you all Grandpa's story in her own words. because she's a wealth of information on the subject matter, but there is no replacement experience or studied learned knowledge for, somebody's lived experience.
Being in the belly of the beast for how long she's been.
Right.
So a little forewarning. As long as this intro has been, this interview is going to be longer. So please bear with us. It's probably about 90. It's almost a 90-minute, or if not, maybe a little bit longer. But there's really good information in there, and obviously it means a lot to us to have our dear grandma on the show.
Yes. So with that being said, let us introduce you to our beautiful, talented grandmother.
Often imitated, never duplicated.
Grandma, welcome to the show. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are going to be the first ever interview on the Weapons of Meme Destruction podcast. And we have been teasing this with the listeners for quite a long time. So I'm pretty sure that most of them are chomping at the bit to hear what Grandma has to say.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I think the way we'll go about this, Grandma, is, we'll just kind of start at the very beginning. Who was Grandpa as a person, and the time that you got to know him, like how did you guys meet and stuff like that. So just start at the very beginning.
Well, the very beginning is I met him on a blind date. He was friends with one of my classmates in school, and we started dating that way. And he was flying on a B-36 at the time as a left-hand gunner and was in the Air Force. So he would only come home on, weekend, or every month or two he would come home. So he'd be home for a couple of weeks, then he'd be gone again. And he decided that he wanted to fly. So he took the cadets test, which was the pilot's test at that time, passed it, and he was fixing to get out of the military. He had been in there 4 years, so he took the pilot's test, and off to pilot training he went. When he got done with the pilot training, we got married, and off we went to the one base here and one base there.
No, Grandma, was he smooth? Was he slick? Was he like charming like me, or was he more of a stick in the mud and just kind of rigid and, kind of like Dane? Exactly.
He was an all-American guy, played football on Saturday with the local boys. And he was just a really nice guy. And I went to school with his brothers and sisters. And of course, I thought, when I was introduced to him, I thought he was awfully old because he was like 22 and I was like 16.
Holy smokes, robbing the cradle.
It sounds different nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. And no, he was just a really nice guy, treated you decently. Took me downtown Denver to a big swanky restaurant, which, at a 16-year-old kid, it was a pretty impressive thing. Tablecloths and cloth napkins and the whole bit,
Lobster and all that good stuff, right?
Lobster and all that good stuff.
That does sound a little bit more stick in the mud, formal, in a good type of way.
Right.
Yeah. So you said that you were in school with his younger siblings?
Yes. Well, I had one that was older than me, Ted, which was a year older than me, and then Gretchen, she was a couple years younger than me. So the Herdlickas were all through they had them spaced out pretty good.
So knowing members of the family before you got to know him, did you hear any good stories about him? Did you know basically what you were getting yourself into, or was it all a complete surprise?
No, I didn't have any stories about him. I dated his brother Ted at one time. We went out, but I worked in the drugstore down there, and David used to come into the drugstore, and I used to see him. But he was going with another girl at that time. So,
Shame on him.
I never had to converse with him or anything like that.
If Ted struck out, he just struck while the iron was hot. Grandpa was an opportunist. That's all he was.
No, it was our friend that set us up, is who it was.
Gotcha. So you date for a couple years, and then you get married, or
3 years. I got married when I was 19. So I had to wait through the pilot training and all that. So as soon as he finished, he graduated like October 30th. We got married November the 3rd, and we were off to Luke Air Force Base. And that was the first assignment that he had.
So you were
now, you mentioned.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, David.
You mentioned that he was about to get out, right?
Well, he had. Well, what it was is in those days, and I don't know how it is now, but after 4 years of service, you could either re-up or get out. And he was an enlisted man for the first 4 years. And so after he took the pilot's training, found out that he was going to be able to be a pilot, then he was out for 6 months because the pilot school didn't start early enough for him to go right from, his active duty right to the school. So there was 6 months that he was home in Littleton, so we got to see each other every day.
Oh, cool.
And then, so as soon as the marriage was a done deal, you were whisked off to Lucas Air Force Base. Where is that located at?
It's down at Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah, we had the reception right after the wedding. We jumped in the car and away we went, and got in a snowstorm in Raton Pass and spent the night in Raton Pass.
So then you immediately had regrets.
Say what?
Like you immediately had regrets, thinking, "What the heck did you just get yourself into?"
No, I mean, I was pretty much, I was young enough. I always used to joke that he got me so young so he could train me the way he wanted me. So I basically trusted your granddad to do anything. I mean, I would have walked on coals or whatever he told me to do, I would have done because I just trusted him that much.
Grandma, I find that very hard to believe because in all of the 30 some odd years that I've known you, I don't think that you're the trainer, not the trainee.
Yeah, well, back then it was a little different time.
Yeah.
I hadn't grown into my meanness.
Oh, it's not meanness, it's directness.
Oh,
That's
okay.
right. That's right. It just, some people just can't hack it, Grandma. So.
Right.
Especially one of those sons of yours, he'll remain nameless, but he's a bit of a button pusher, huh?
Right.
So, all right. So from the time of marriage until so he was shot down in May of 65. So about what year did you get married? How many years did you guys have together before that happened?
Well, we were married 8 years. We were together 11 years. And we had a 3-year stint in England. And we came back from England and stationed at McConnell Air Force Base at Wichita, Kansas. And that's where he left and we knew when we left England that the Vietnam War was going on and it was, building and building. And so we were kind of on alert that whole year and a half we were at McConnell when he got the call. And our squadron was one of the first squadrons to be sent to Vietnam. Well, actually, he didn't get sent to Vietnam. He got sent to Laos. And he was stationed at Tak Ly Air Force Base in Thailand. And they flew out of Tak Ly and did their bombing missions over Laos, which was the Ho Chi Minh Trail is what they were bombing.
So before he got the call, like you said, you guys knew things were heating up over there and maybe it was just a matter of time before he got the call. Did you guys have any discussions, just the two of you, that way you got kind of a read on what he thought about the war in general, or where was his mind at before he got called?
It was such a rush. They gave us 2 days, and there was a lot of paperwork and scurrying around to get him packed and get things set up, the things I had to do, and because he handled all the books and everything, so he had to basically show me what needed to be done. And supposedly he was going to be gone for 4 months. So when I'd ask a question, he'd say, "Oh, don't worry about that. I'll be back in 4 months and take care of it," and what have you. So we were too busy doing that to get into that. The only thing that he did tell me, he said, "Well, if I'm ever captured, I'll try to escape." And of course, naive me, I'm thinking, well, no problem. If he's ever captured, he'll just escape and come home. That's how naive I was.
Well, but like you said, you personally got to a point of trust with him that you probably had a belief that he could probably move mountains if he wanted to, and he probably could escape if push came to shove.
I had enough faith in him that I thought he could move mountains to do anything. I trusted him. Like I said, I trusted him with my life, which many times we were close because we had a private airplane when we lived in California. He got us in several skirmishes with that little plane.
That doesn't sound anything like our family at all whatsoever. It's never happened in our history.
Like we blew a tire on takeoff from Rock Springs, Wyoming one time, and then we got in a box canyon, and the oil pressure was going up in the airplane. And I always knew when we were in trouble because he got really quiet and he got really white around the gills. And so I knew we were in dire straits.
He'd never actually tell you.
Family trait.
He'd never actually give you an oh shit moment. He'd just clam up, and so you knew.
He just got real quiet, and I always knew when he got real quiet, it was serious. So I always shut up too. I didn't say anything either.
Yeah, you don't want to rattle any cages any more than they were already rattling.
No, for sure.
That's funny. So at the time that he got the call, you had 3 kids at the time, correct?
Yes.
So how old were they at the time, respectively?
They were 7, 4, and almost 3. Damien was still 2. He turned at the time. Are you talking about the time he was shot down, right?
Oh, well, when he got the call, when he left.
No. Well,
yeah.
it would have, same age as 7, 4, and almost 3.
Okay.
So how long did? Well, if I don't.
No, go ahead.
I'm stepping on toes. How long did Grandpa operate before the actual incident? Like, did he? I'm sure they said that he was running missions. He ran a couple of missions before the night of the event, right?
He had several missions, and then he had a 2-week TDY. He left on April 7th, and he was shot down May 18th. And he was just shot down shortly after he had his 2-week. They called him R&R, rest and recuperation. Right. And he had gone to Bangkok, and hence the picture of him with the big python snake wrapped around his shoulders. That was when he was on R&R.
I don't think I've ever seen that picture.
I don't think I have either.
I'll have to put it on a computer and send it to you guys.
Yeah.
Post it up online.
So did he know, anything about before he actually went over? Did he know basically what he was going to be doing, or he didn't find any of that out until he got there?
No.
So did you know basically what he was going to have to be doing before he left?
No. We knew because that's what he did. He practiced gunnery range all the time. And we knew. And he said to me, he said, this is what they've trained me for. So now I have to go do the job. That's what he told me before he left.
And did he ever discuss, I'm assuming you had some correspondence with him over the time period. Did he ever discuss like how he felt about the war while he was operating, or?
He never said anything to me in his letters. The thing is, the military warns their soldiers and what have you not to put any kind of controversial things in the mail. But the thing is that I noticed in his letters later on, you could tell just by the tone of his letter that he was disillusioned with what was going on. He didn't come out and say it because, like I said, they warned you against any political statements in your letters or anything like that.
So he didn't say anything specifically, but you noticed like a tone change in the way he was writing.
Well, it's kind of like, the military's like a rah, good old boy network, one for the team, and we all do this and what have you. And I just noticed that wasn't there. And I think he was realizing that, what was really going on, and he wasn't happy with it.
Yeah, because I guess if he was only there for about a month and a half before it happened, roughly how many letters was he able to send back before?
He wrote every day, and I wrote every day. In fact, I got a letter after he was shot down. I got the letter that he wrote on the day he was shot down.
Oh, wow.
And so, because like back then, the Postal Service was real slow. I mean, it was like the Pony Express. Our letters would cross in mailing, and so on and so forth. But it was just
these little whippersnappers nowadays don't know what it was like back then.
No,
these instant text messages over the
instantaneous.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
So no, it was very slow talking to one another in that day and age, and no phone calls. I mean, you couldn't call over there and talk to him. It was all done by letters.
Yeah. So, all right. So from the day he was shot down until when, like, what was your first interaction with the military in terms of breaking the news to you? Like, how long was the lag time in that? When did you first talk to somebody?
Well, they immediately, when they got the shoot down, of course, it was daytime over there, nighttime here. So the very next morning, bright and early, they were at my doorstep. They were there at 8:00 in the morning to notify me. And so it was immediate. I mean, within the, like I said, it was nighttime over there, daytime here. And so as soon as the daylight came, they came to the door.
And were you living on base at the time?
No. I lived in a civilian community, so I was on the telephone talking to one of the other wives and looked out my window and saw that staff car coming down the road, and I knew that I was the only family member on that street. So I told her I got to hang up, I got to go, and because I knew they were coming to my house, and as I opened the door and I'm shaking my head, the Colonel Banneker, who was the base commander at the time, he said, "Oh, it's not that bad. It's not that bad." Because, of course, I thought he was shot down. He was probably dead. And they said, no, it's not that bad. We don't know exactly who has him or anything, but we don't know whether he walked away or whether he was carried. But
they knew that he survived?
They knew he survived. And they said that their statement to me was, "We don't know whether the friendlies or the unfriendlies had him." That's what they told me. And they said one village on one side of the mountain could be pro-American, and on the other side of the mountain, it would be pro-communist. So they didn't know who had him. Little did we know that he fell right into the Pathet Lao headquarters at Sam Nua, Laos, is where he ended up.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask, because it sounds like it's a bit of a crapshoot in terms of not knowing which village is friendly or not, but they had to know based on the area that he was that, hey, this is either a more enemy-dominated area or a more friendly-dominated area. So they had to know at least that. But
well, just like I say, they didn't know from one village to the other which was pro-American, which was not.
Oh, so you didn't learn about the Pathet Lao heavily being in that area until after the fact?
Oh no, I didn't learn about him bailing out in the Pathet Lao headquarters for a couple of years before, because in the beginning they didn't even want to talk about Laos. They didn't want to even acknowledge the fact, even though everybody knew that the secret war in Laos was going on. They cautioned me right off not to be saying anything about the fact that he'd gone down in Laos, and they trained me really good from the beginning. Told me to stay away from the media and not give out any statements or anything.
Did any media ever reach out to you in the early days?
I don't really recall, because that first year was in a total fog, and I just tried to stay under the radar, you might say, because I was trying to do what they told me to do. And
now, did it ever feel like at any moment or strike you as like they were trying to control the situation?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, they were controlling the situation from day one. And as I look back at now, they were also controlling me. And, because they would later on, they would come to me and they'd say, well, a POW got shot and died. We don't know whether it's David or Shelton. And then, well, we had a POW that died from malnutrition, and we don't know whether it's David or Shelton. And so now that I look back on it, that they were starting to train me to the fact that they were going to have to consider that he's dead, because they weren't going to get him out. And so I looked at it as they were schooling me from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because, and we've actually talked about this on the podcast before, about when we say things, negative towards the foreign policy establishment, we always bifurcate between this is not an attack on the troops themselves.
Correct.
We believe that when the troops say no man left behind, troop to troop, we think that they're being honest about that. But when it comes to the decision makers, politician to troop, and says no man left behind, it's a lie. It's all a facade. So, yeah, go ahead.
Basically what it is that the no man left behind is, like you say, that talking about the guys on the ground. The guys on the ground aren't going to go leave their guys behind. The guys that fly in the air is another situation, because they're going to be in the enemy's hands, and it's going to be up to the negotiators and the policymakers to get them released. Whereas, yes, you're right, that no man left behind is strictly for the guys on the ground that are not going to leave their buddies in a war situation.
Okay, right. So the airmen, it's one of two things: either you die in the crash, or you're in enemy hands. Like there's no chance that
correct
you get saved. If something like that.
Unless they get them. They were guys that were rescued. I mean, that bailed out, and they had radios to put out beepers, and they had rescue teams that went out in helicopters. In fact, we had one of the guys in our squadron had bailed out, and he got caught in a tree, and they got him picked up, broke his arm getting him out of the tree, but nevertheless, they rescued him.
Okay. So you mentioned that in the beginning is basically the Air Force itself that was, quote unquote, training you and making sure that you weren't talking to anybody, and they were the ones that were kind of giving you the information on stuff. When did it switch over from having to deal with Air Force specific personnel to where it was bureaucrats and or politicians that were kind of feeding you or withholding information from you about Grandpa's status?
Well, as I found out later, that the Air Force, as they told me, they were the bottom of the chain. The chain of command, of course, was a defense intelligence agency. They were collecting all the intelligence. And the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, was getting all the information on Laos. Well, they just handed to Casualty, which is the Air Force, which handled me, and they just handed Casualty what they wanted them to know. And the head of Casualty told me later on, he said, we just get what they trickle down to us. So they didn't even know really what was going on. So there's a total, I guess you would say, not a disconnect, it's purposeful, that the CIA doesn't share with the DIA, the DIA doesn't share with the CIA. And so you have all these entities that aren't sharing the information on what's going on.
Yeah.
So again, it becomes very easy to disavow the little guy and blame him for misinformation because they never even got the information in the first place.
Correct.
So you hold the messenger is always executed, but not the sender of the message necessarily.
Yeah. The Casualty, all they were there to do was handle the family members and, help us with problems that they could help us with. But as far as information, they didn't get much information themselves, as I found out later on. In the beginning, of course, I thought that the Air Force was the one that was handling the whole thing and getting all the information. I thought they were getting all the information on.
Yeah, I mean, that's what anybody would think. Because you think, well, if the military themselves are the ones calling the shots, how can they call the shots if they don't have all the information? So everything must begin and end with them. That's the most reasonable thing for anybody to think. But now that you say that, I'm connecting a dot that I've always thought about for a long time, but I never really applied it to our family situation in particular. So fast forward to 9/11. What was the big argument for why we needed the Department of Homeland Security? It's because, the FBI had information, the CIA had information, and all these other agencies that had information that were like little red flags that maybe something was going to go down, but they weren't talking to each other. And that's why we needed this one organization to control it all. And it sounds like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like you said, it's almost like it's intentional the way they have everything bifurcated and not talking to each other, because it always gives them plausible deniability. And then it also, after the fact, allows them to grab more power to create more agencies because they say, we weren't talking, so you need to give us more freedom. So
Or to tack onto that kind of idea, it also kind of syncs it up a little bit more so they can actually control the narrative from the very beginning, as opposed to like have a bunch of different people that don't know what to go out and say. If there's one entity telling everybody what they need to go out and say, what their lines are, that makes it a whole heck of a lot easier to control or damage control any situation that they need to.
Well, you'll never make all of those agencies share because they just won't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, it doesn't sound like they won't do it because they're stubborn or inefficient or just stupid. Which I bet that there's a heavy dose of all of that in every one of those agencies. But like you said, it almost does seem intentional. Now that kind of sounds conspiracy theory, because how can you prove that it's intentional? Well, I mean, it just stands to reason. Why would you not do that? Because it gives you plausible deniability to get away with whatever you did wrong.
Well, the CIA is never going to share their information because we've had a lawsuit against them since 2008. Well, I guess it started back in 1998, and they're not giving up the POW documents even today. After 50 years, they're not giving up the documents. So that would make you question as to why won't they give up the documents after that many years?
Just to get to like basically win this whole plot, because still now you're still trusting the government. What happened immediately after you were informed that Grandpa was shot down, but he might come back? What was your mission control? What did you start doing? What was your motivation moving forward?
Well, you just lived every day, and I waited every day to hear something, and it went on until 1973 when they released all the POWs, and David wasn't one of them. And so you have to make up your mind what you're going to do. And at that time, the school system in Wichita was having difficulty, and they were having riots at the school and what have you. I decided I didn't want David, my oldest boy, to be in that environment. I wanted to get out of Wichita and move out to the country where he'd have more of a chance, to play sports in a smaller school system. And so in about 1972, I started making an effort to move out. And but, you still don't know because there's nothing final. They're not coming up with any information other than the fact he wasn't one of the first ones on the airplane in 1973. And they called me and said, well, there's been a little glitch and we'll get back with you when we know more.
So from that time, from 65 to 73, and maybe it was sporadic, but if you could just ballpark it, like how often were they corresponding with you, giving you updates? Or did you have to go chase them down for them to just say, we don't know? Like, how did that work?
Well, looking back, I feel sorry for the poor corpsman because I would be on the phone calling and yelling and screaming at him, like daily or weekly or whatever. Anytime anything came up, and I look back now and I think, oh my gosh, those poor kids that were at the other end of that phone when I was in one of my twits. And they had to put up with my yelling and screaming. Well, the thing is that I found out a year after David was shot down, the capture picture came out in the Denver Post. And somebody from my in-laws called me from Denver and told me that picture was in there. So, of course, I'm immediately on the phone yelling at Casualty, wanting to know why that picture is in the Denver Post, but yet I hadn't received it. Well, they didn't even know anything about it, which now I understand why they didn't, was because the CIA and the DIA was not sharing that information with them. And so they were in as bad a situation, basically, looking back on it, as I was. But anyway, I demanded that they get that picture for me, which they did. And, when I would call up, like, for instance, my mother came and took care of the kids for a couple of weeks while one of the other wives and I took a vacation. And I had to have privileges for her to go on the Air Force base to get groceries. And so I would just call up the base commander and he would give me the okay. Or if I needed something from Casualty, I'd call up and, ask them. And they always tried to help me. But like I said, looking back on it now, I realized that they didn't have any more information than I had. They were being told what to tell me.
So did you ever find out how that picture got to the Denver Post? Obviously, if the CIA wasn't telling the Air Force, how did that picture find its way back? I mean, it's obvious why it was in Denver, because that's where you guys were from before.
Yeah, well, that's where he went into the service. So that's his home of record is why it came out.
Okay.
But no, I never did find out how that picture got to the Denver Post. It was in the, well, it would have had to have been, well, I can't say it would have had to have been, but it came out in the Pravda paper. So some intelligence agency somewhere had to have picked it up. And so like I said, I don't know.
And you said 73 was when the troops started coming home and Grandpa wasn't part of those troops. What kind of information were they giving you? And when was the final, like, he's not coming home, if there ever was one?
Oh, no. They called when they started advertising on television and everything that they were releasing the POWs from Vietnam. They were on the phone to me immediately and to let me know he wasn't going to be one of them on that first flight. And, you know, as the years went by, we found out that was supposed to be just the first flight, not the only flight. And as the policy became muddied and everything, and Nixon got on TV and stated that all the POWs were home, everybody was shocked because even the people inside the government expected to see waves of 500 men because there were like 2,500 left. So, and I don't know how many numbers, because that's the other thing. They manipulated the numbers. I think there were probably like 1,500 from Vietnam and 500 from Laos, and then they dwindled it down to 300 and some from Laos. So
was that flight that you're referring to, was that Operation Homecoming, and that was in 1973?
Yes,
okay.
That was Operation Homecoming. Yep.
Okay. So essentially that was the government saying to the American people, not just the POW families, that, all right, we're done, we're getting out of this thing, we're bringing the troops home kind of thing.
Yeah.
And anybody who's not on these flights is either we don't know where they're at or they're dead. Is that basically what the government's line was, what tack they were taking at that time?
I don't know what they told the other families. They just contacted me, and I assume they contacted the other family members that had family members that they knew were POWs, and I imagine they contacted them to let them know they weren't on that flight. But I don't know what they said to them. I don't know whether they told them, you know, there'll be more flights or this is all. Well, because Nixon didn't get on the TV immediately and say, I don't know how many days it was before he got on TV. They just was making a big thing out of the homecoming, you know, and then he made that statement on TV.
So that at this point, you're still trusting the information that albeit it's moving, they keep moving the goalposts and they're not being as forthcoming with you, but you still believe that whatever you're being told is vaguely the truth by this establishment, right? At this point?
Yeah, see, at this point, I believe that, you know, they're still looking for David. They're still trying to find out what happened to David. And of course, I bounce between he's dead and, well, he's probably alive. Well, he's dead. And so that's the way you live. And every day you get up one day and you say, well, I'm sure he's alive. And the next day you get up and you think, well, maybe he's gone. And so that was the ping pong that you lived with. So when they called me and said he wasn't on that flight, I assumed, and they said that they were continuing to investigate, I assumed that they were investigating. It wasn't until many years later I found out were they not only investigating, they weren't doing anything and had no intention of doing anything.
So am I misremembering part of the story, or is this true that they classified him as different things multiple times? So like they would classify him as KIA and then they would reclassify a POW. Did that happen, or am I just like filling in blanks with inaccurate information?
No, that they started off when he first got shot down, they called it detained. And then it was probably 6 months before they moved him into a POW status. But then they had him in an MIA status, and then they did a KIA status.
And what year was that? Did it switch over from MIA to KIA?
That was 1977.
Okay.
So by that point, had you started moving on with your life? Were you just kind of accepting that, or were you still kind of like, You just
No,
accepted the KIA status, or?
No, I basically had decided in my own mind that he was probably dead. And so I started making plans to move on and do whatever I could to survive.
Right. So the first time they initially classified him as KIA in 77, because is his current status as of today is POW MIA, correct?
No, he's still presumptive finding of death.
Oh, okay, so they after 77 they never changed it back.
Oh, no,
so
no.
That's been his status ever since then.
I contacted the U.S. Air Force and tried to get his status changed in the early 90s because I got all those live sighting reports, but they wouldn't change his status.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's probably where I was confused at, because I had remembered the portion of the story where you were pressing to get his status changed, but I didn't know if they like you were saying, ping pong ball back and forth, like, oh, he's POW, now he's KIA, now he's POW. But
well, the thing is that I always said is, how does a POW go into an MIA status? A man is in a prison system. He doesn't go missing. And of course, the KIA was the presumptive finding of death that they did in 1977 to clear the rolls so they didn't have any more POWs or MIAs.
So then they got to quit answering questions about why aren't these guys home?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, they made the American public think that everybody was dead.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, as long as the masses aren't pushing for something, then the collective memory of the masses are like a goldfish. Fast forward 2 years and they forgot it all happened at all.
You have to kind of back up to a little bit of history during the homecoming when the Congress found out that the POWs had been tortured and all that done. They threw a fit in Congress and they decided they weren't giving Vietnam any money. Well, that is the main crux of the whole thing. Nixon had promised to pay the Vietnamese $4.5 billion in constructive aid after the war. Well, then when Congress reneged on that and didn't follow through, that's when the POW situation, I mean, that's a really involved thing that it would take us days to get through, but that's really a simplistic form of really what happened. And that's when Nixon said all the POWs are home, basically telling the Vietnamese, tough, you've got them, you keep them.
Well, at least we learned from our mistakes. We've never let that happen
right.
ever again in our history. Definitely not within a couple of months of our recent history. Thank God that we learned our lessons.
Yeah, we really learn from the past. We do.
Oh, of course. So you say in 83 or 85 that's when he was pronounced KIA, and then he started to just. What year was it?
1977. They did a presumptive finding of a President Carter.
Okay.
President Carter got in there and decided that the best thing to do with all of the MI or all of the POWs is do a presumptive finding of death and declare everybody dead. And that's what they did.
Wow. Based on what? Just the fact that they weren't home?
Just based on the fact that's what they decided to do. I don't know that they ever had any, what you would call reason for doing it, other than they wanted to clear the slate.
Yeah.
Right. So then they just make this carte blanche statement and everyone kind of accepts it and everyone goes living their lives the way that they know how to within the given circumstance. So what do you do in that given time from that time to roughly about late 1989, early 1990?
Well, I just went on with my life. And if you're asking when was my awakening, that was in 1990 when I received my first live sighting report.
Because so that's basically, Go ahead.
Up until then, I believed what the government was telling me. You have to understand there was a little different mindset back then. You believed in country, you believed in the government, you believed in the military, and I never believed in my wildest dreams that they would abandon David in captivity because, it was always like we leave no man behind. So I assumed that means that they would do their utmost to get him out. But as I found out later over the years, they did nothing to get him out. They did no negotiations with the Laotians. When time and time again, the Laotians told them You have to negotiate for the POWs with us. We will not release our POWs through Laos. And so Kissinger, instead of going and negotiating with the Laotians, he just negotiated with the Vietnamese and covered up the fact that they left the men in Laos.
So this is a part of the story that, again, this might be me misremembering things. So correct me if I'm wrong. So we never negotiated for any sort of money to be paid to Laos to get the prisoners out, because they were never even invited to the Paris Peace Accords, because by doing so, the United States government would essentially admit that they were committing war crimes, that they were, bombing non-belligerent sovereign soil without a declaration of war. Is that
Right.
accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's very accurate.
So, and from the Laotians' perspective, being as reasonable as possible, their thinking is, hey, you just destroyed a whole bunch of our country. We weren't even at war with you. So we're going to keep these prisoners basically as leverage to make you pay us to rebuild our country. Was that basically what their thinking was?
Correct. In fact, in some of the documents that I found later on, that's basically what the Laotians said, is that until you pay us reparations for all of the damage you have done, we will not release our men, or the POWs.
And another part of the story I think I remember, is it true that when Reagan came into office, not being necessarily a part of that whole, Bush, Kissinger, good old boy scenario beforehand, and he found out that there were still POWs, he was a little hot under the collar and wanted to go get them, but Bush kind of, as his vice president, steered him away from it. Is that true, or how much do you know about that part of it?
Well, the thing is that there was a offer made from the Vietnamese for 57 POWs, and the offer came through Canada to us, and everybody was like, we got to go get them. But the people that surrounded Reagan controlled that, and George Bush was the big controller there. And they didn't want to go get them. They didn't want to open that wound, because they didn't want to admit that they had left men behind. So once the lie was put in place, and once Nixon said there were no POWs, then every organization, every agency would have to follow that policy line, no matter what. But Reagan did try. He did a what do you want to call it? A covert operation, and sent some people over there to check it out. But at every corner, I'm sure, because I've got letters where they were working behind Ross Perot's back when he was trying to get stuff done. Colin Powell and them saying, we got to control Perot. We can't let him do this. We can't let him, because the Vietnamese were very friendly to Perot. And I really think if Perot had gotten to be the one to go negotiate, we would have gotten all of our POWs home, because they were very open to him. And you can see from all the backbiting in Washington, D.C., they're trying to cut Perot off at the knees and stop him from gaining any favor with the Vietnamese or bringing any POWs out.
Yeah.
So you keep saying that, or it seems like our government over the years kept trying to not only bring Grandpa home, or not even trying, but actively pursuing quite the counter to that. So what happened in 1990 that finally lit you off that the government wasn't on your side this whole time, that it was actually, just placating you and weaving a tail of yarn pretty much?
Well, I received a letter, and it's talking in the letter about how David had tried to escape. And I'm standing there reading this letter thinking, how does a dead man escape? How does he try to escape? And then it goes on in the letter, and it debunks the report and blah, blah, blah. So, of course, I believe him again. I think, oh, well, they're right. It's probably just somebody making stories up and what have you. So it goes along.
Propaganda, so to speak,
Yeah,
right.
Propaganda. So then in 6 months, I get another report. And in the report, it actually says that this is a reporting officer is talking to a General Chang in Laos, suspected of holding D. Herdlicka and friends. And I'm like, holy crap. And the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and then I was mad. So I was wanting the phone.
That might be an understatement of the year there, Grandma.
Yep,
Keep going.
yep. And I am on the phone again, and I am screaming at everybody that will pick up the phone. And so pretty soon it gets to where nobody will pick up the phone. I thought, I got to change my tactics here because I'm not getting anywhere. So that is what did the rude awakening. Then I was watching TV, and they had a Joan Rivers show on there, and Marion Shelton, who was the wife of the guy that was shot down close to your granddad's time, and Ann Holland were on there, and they were talking about this book, Kiss the Boys Goodbye. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I got to get that book. Well, I get to Wichita and get the book, Kiss the Boys Goodbye, and I start reading that book, and it was like everything in that book that was kind of the same stuff they had told me. They had told other family members, keep your mouth shut, because if you mention the fact your husband's a POW, you might get him killed, and on, and don't go to the media, and on and on. And I thought, oh my gosh, they used the same tactics on me that they used on the other.
It was a playbook.
Yep. And not only that, but they also used that same tactic on the returning POWs, because when they came home, they told them, don't say anything about the men that are left behind because you get them killed. So just be quiet about that. We'll handle it. So they played their hand very well, but the government would.
There's got to be a special place in hell reserved for the type of people that would use threats and coercion to get you to not take actions to save your family member, a family member that they know they're not going to take any actions to get. So what you could do on the back end as a family member by, going to the media and try to raise awareness and try to get some support drummed up and all that kind of stuff. They use the fear of you doing that is going to be harmful to this person to stop you from doing it. All the while, they know full well they have no intentions to do anything about it to rectify the situation.
Yeah. No,
it sounds almost similar to them saying that we're working as hard as we can to get your husband back, Mrs. Herdlicka, but they know full well that they aren't doing any of that. They're just placating you and dragging you along the line.
They're doing the opposite. What they're doing behind closed doors is every live sighting report that comes in, they are debunking and deep sixing so that it will not come to light. And of course, the media plays right to the government and believes everything the government tells you. So they played the game very well because they kept the families from going to the media. And by the time we finally did go to the media, it was too late because then they could paint us as distraught family members that just are so emotional that we can't accept reality.
Why would they stop from just robbing you of your loved one for 30 plus years? Why would they stop there? They've got to, add on and make you look like a crazy person too, right?
Right. Well, not only that, but they don't want any POWs coming out to show that the men were left behind. So they're going to have to debunk every live sighting report that comes in. And that's what they do. They just make us out like we're just crazy people. We believe in UFOs and stuff like that. And and now you're seeing that there may be UFOs. So same thing.
Things are going topsy-turvy when they admit finally that the UFOs exist and no one bats an eye like, oh, well, that's not as important as this other stuff that's going on.
That's what'll happen with the POW issue, 20 years down the road after they figure all the POWs are dead, that they will finally admit probably that they left people behind.
Yeah. And so these live sighting reports that you first started getting in 1990, and that's kind of like you said, when the scales were peeled back from your eyes and you actually saw the whole regime for what it actually was, were those reports contemporaneously? So like when you got your hands on it, was it a report that was written like a week ago, or were those reports that were written back in the 70s that got declassified?
Oh, no. It was a report that was written in 89, but I didn't get until 1990. So it was a current report. And the thing is that the interesting part of the report is it's the only one I got. And I received it during the time that Colonel Peck was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And his motto was he was going to give the family members all of the information. But when he got in that job, he found out they were doing the same thing to him. They were cutting him off and stopping him from being able to get to the bottom of it. In fact, he got so mad that he resigned, and he took a knife and nailed his resignation to the door of his office and walked out. That's how frustrated he was. And he said that in his resignation letter, he goes on about how the practice of debunking is well entrenched in the agencies that is receiving the information on the POWs.
So,
but I forgot to say that in this report it says that they're suspected General Chang of holding D. Hrdlicka and friends, and the reporting officer states down below, says the outcome of my conversation to follow. Well, I spent 20 years, trying to get the outcome of that conversation. And I have sent freedom of information requests for that to the DIA, the CIA, and everything, and they have never given me that report. And so I think that report was probably pretty damning. That's why I never got it.
So that leads me to my next question. What did you do? Like, what was your next course of action? I'm sure you were taken aback by like Kiss the Boys Goodbye, by that initial letter that you got. Where did you start? Like what spurred you on, and what actions did you take after you?
I started by screaming at the defense.
Well, yeah, like you said, but Dana and I both know that's not where it stops. So,
and that's where I started. And
right.
So then, I started getting involved in the POW community, which I had never been involved in the POW community. And so they helped me with a lot of things and told me how to go about and research and trying to find documents and stuff. So that's when the real quest for information started, was 1990. And it just ballooned. They told me, they said, watch for reports that have handwriting in the margins. And in the meantime, we got the Senate Select Committee. Senator Smith worked to get the Senate Select Committee hearings on the POW-MIA. And I got a great education there because I got to watch the government witnesses get up there and lie under oath time and time again to that committee, and never have any repercussions at all for their lying.
Any interesting names in those people that lied?
Well, yeah, Mr. Trowbridge for one, and
okay.
he was one of the big ones that was on your grandfather's case from day one. But the thing is, I don't know whether those people that are in those agencies, I don't know how to put it, purposely do that, or they just ignore and follow the policy. Because when you're working in a government agency, you have to follow the policy line. And if the policy line says they're all dead, then you have to make them all dead. So any information that comes in, you have to slant it towards they're dead. You can't go against the grain, or you have no job.
Yeah. So, and am I correct? The Senate Select Committee hearings, what was that, 92?
92, yes.
Okay. And so, and you testified at those hearings, correct?
Yes. Well, I remember there was a guy by the name of Roger Shield, who was the POW person in the DIA. And after he testified, I walked up behind him and leaned over his shoulder, and I said, "You just perjured yourself." And when I said that, he jumped up and he said, Mrs. Hrdlicka. I just kept walking. I had a meeting with Senator Smith behind the podium, so I just kept walking. And when I came back out later, and he was in the hearing room, and so he rushes over to him, he says, Mrs. Hrdlicka. He says, "I couldn't tell you David was alive." And I reached up and I got a hold of his tie, and I jerked on his tie. And I said, "But you couldn't tell me he was dead." And he says, "But Mrs. Hrdlicka, I couldn't tell you he's alive." And I jerked on his tie again. And I said, "But you couldn't tell me he was dead."
And just to help with the visual of the listeners. So, Grandma, you're about what, 5'2", 5'3"?
I'm 5'2", well, 5'1" now, and he was about 6'2", so he was probably a head or so taller than me.
That would have been a sight to see. Tugging on his tie, like, get down here. I have something to tell you, buddy.
Yeah, you deal with 15-pound animals every day. You're nothing, Pipsqueak.
Well, the thing is, as I sat through those hearings, I did see this. Stott was his name, and he worked in the POW casual or POW division in Vietnam, and they were interviewing Vietnamese boat people. And so to discredit the boat people, they would get you to tell the story. And this say the Vietnamese says, well, I went in this building and I turned to the right and I walked up the stairs and I saw all these American POWs. And so what they do then is they flip the picture over of the building so that actually the stairwell is now on the left. So that's how they debunk them. And during this time frame, the Stott was putting these pictures up, and Senator Smith, we took a lunch break, and after the lunch break was over, Senator Smith came in. His face was beet red, and he was mad as hell. And he reamed the Stott up one side and down the other because he caught the fact that they had flipped that photo.
Is that called the Looney Tunes defense?
Yeah,
The whoop, 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 whoop. We changed the picture, and now it's everything's. You're wrong, and we're right.
I think
and so that's what they called the boat people that were coming back, and they were given all this information about American POWs. That's the way they were debunking them.
So when you say boat people, these are like locals on the ground that are like, hey, we're Laotians and we know generally what Laotians look like, and they don't look like 6'3" white guys. Is it basically something like that where, these people are like, hey, I saw these people that look like Americans?
The boat people were Vietnamese that were escaping Vietnam.
Okay.
And they were interviewing them. They're debriefing them, you might say, as they were coming out. And they were all giving stories of POWs. And of course, the American government didn't want to hear about POWs, so they had to debunk them. So that was one way they did it. They discredited them by flip-flopping pictures and what have you. Who knows what else they did. That was just one that Senator Smith caught.
So in terms of, now we know a little bit more of this story, but I think this is going to come to, I don't really think that many neocons are listening to this podcast, but just in case they are, we're going to tell them to, put on their big boy britches, because we're going to say some negative things about, their patron saint, John McCain. Was the Senate Select Committee hearings in '92 your first interactions with him? And whether that's a yes or a no, just, I guess, kind of start from the beginning of when you first met McCain and all of your interactions with him and how he either helped or didn't help the POW cause overall.
Well, I really didn't meet much with Senator McCain, but I did work through his office on several issues, which I got no help with. And it wasn't until after the Senate Select Committee hearings that I had, you might say, confrontations with Senator McCain on very different points, because Senator McCain was definitely not in our camp at all as far as trying to prove that the POWs were there or that men were left. In fact, during the Senate Select Committee hearings, I have documents showing he wanted records destroyed that was pertaining to POWs. And so he did not ever want anything to come out. So
did he ever give a reason for wanting them destroyed?
Well, yeah.
On the record?
He didn't. Yeah, he said on the record that he didn't want the POW community getting their hands on these documents.
And no further explanation than that. You're not entitled to the information on your own family members, according to McCain.
Yeah, no, he didn't want any. Well, he didn't want us being any stronger than we were as far as having documents and proving that men had been left behind. So he didn't want any of us to have any more, I guess, called firepower.
Yeah.
Well, gee, Grandma, that sounds like that flies directly in the face of the narrative that the media has been painting him as for the last 40 years, right?
Well, he is definitely not a hero to the POW community, and he is a hero in his own mind, because the statement with McCain is that he was shot down, and he made everybody believe that his broken arms were from torture. They were not. He broke his arms bailing out of the aircraft, and then one of the very first things they teach fighter pilots is before you pull a seat, you pull those shoulders and those arms in. Well, he didn't do it, so he broke both of his arms. So they fell right in the lake right there in the middle of Hanoi, and so he was tended to by a Vietnamese nurse and a Russian doctor. And if you look at all of the photos of McCain, he has white bandages on.
Yeah.
Then you look at the other POWs, they have these dirty gray bandages on. So he was well taken care of. And in fact, I think if you weighed him when he went in captivity, he probably weighed the same when he came out. Well, the other POWs didn't.
Yeah.
And now, why would they do that, Grandma? Was there anything special about McCain?
He was an admiral's son. So, of course, the Vietnamese knew from day one that they had a plum when they had the admiral's son there. And so the Vietnamese have played this game before with the French. So that they're well versed in POWs and how to handle them and manipulate them and whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, what a lot of people don't realize about McCain that really does the picture is kind of makes sense when you look at it holistically. So why would he be treated better? Because he's an admiral's son. Why did it seem like it's so hard for him to follow a simple rule like tuck in your arms so they don't shear off? Well, that's not that surprising from me when you consider, or for me when you consider his career consisted of what? I think he crashed like 3 or 4 jets, one of them into a side of a carrier or something like that. Like, this guy was not exactly your standout, by the book, did everything the right way type of soldier. He skated by on his status as an admiral's son. If he had been a regular person, he would have been washed out of pilot training after 1 crash, not 5. Yeah.
And his parents went to bat for him every time, and he had special privileges being an admiral's son, which I don't begrudge him having those. I just begrudge him when he puts his I don't know what you want to call it on other people. He belittles us for fighting for our family members and won't stand up. He could have, in my mind, he could have been a real hero. If he would have fought for the POWs, he'd have probably been president of the United States if he'd have done that.
Well, he would have been a real hero if he was actually the person that the American public have been told to believe about him.
Right.
Everybody's been told, like, this is a war hero and he's the, quote, best among us, right? Like especially after Trump got elected, that's what everybody would always say, well, we didn't really like John McCain when he ran against Obama, but he had integrity and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And, the American people are like, it's this carefully curated image of him. And I don't think that image is necessarily detached from his actions towards the POW families. They needed him to be squeaky clean on the military POW issue because he was the one chiefly tasked with running interference between the families and trying to get information. And so if you're just a general population person who doesn't have a family connection like we do, then you just buy that thing hook, line, and sinker. And when somebody like us says, brain cancer is, a good thing because it took him out, we're the bad guys for saying something like that. Yeah. But, it's because the image is never questioned. So
well, the thing is that my question always was, I never could understand why he wouldn't support the POW issue. And in 1985, when he was in the House, he knew, because General Tai testified before a committee in 1985 that there were men left behind. And so McCain asked him, he said, well, how do you know this? And General Tai said, because of the intelligence that comes across my desk daily. So McCain knew, and he could have helped the families. He could have been the real hero and brought those men home, because he would have had the clout behind him to do so, where, maybe somebody else in the government agencies didn't have that power. And
well, like you said, McCain's not the only name that we can throw out there. I'm sure we can go into, Herbert Walker Bush, and we can go into John Kerry and all these other people. But how long were you in the Senate hearing committee? Wasn't the only time you were in Washington, D.C. It seemed like especially when we were younger, it seemed like you were heading off to Washington, D.C. or, whatever other destination to go fight for grandpa. It seemed at least once a month you were going on another trip, it seemed like. So how many years did you fight for grandpa realistically?
Well,
I mean, aside from, I would argue that it was from May 18th on, but
right. Now, the real fight began when I got the live sighting report, because I realized then, shocked to me, that the U.S. government had abandoned David and the other POWs, and I was livid, was the only way to put it. And so I was going to Washington at least once a month, or maybe sometimes more than that. And especially during the hearings, I was up there for every one of the hearings. And in the meantime, I would be going to the different congressmen and senators' offices, trying to lobby for the POWs and get somebody. I just kept thinking that there was going to be somebody with integrity that was going to pick up this issue and going to run with it. And I just, then everybody's, oh, well, that's so terrible and that's so awful. But nobody would do anything. There are very few senators and congressmen that we got to help. And the thing with McCain is he was pretty laid back, as long as Ted Guy, who was the camp commander when McCain was a POW, he kept McCain in control because he knew the things that McCain had done until Ted died. Once Ted Guy died, that's when McCain became really, I don't know what you call it, entrenched in heading anything off about the POWs being alive in Vietnam.
Because basically there was nobody else with any credibility, I guess, because I've always heard that, fellow people that were in the Hanoi Hilton with him, had things to say about, he was probably talking and all that kind of stuff. And nobody could really stick to him like this guy that you were just talking about, right? Was he the only one that really knew where the bodies were buried?
Yeah, Ted knew where the bodies were buried, and that was the thing. And he stayed pretty meek and mild while Ted was alive. But the thing is that McCain also made sure that none of this information about what he did in captivity was going to come out, because he had all of the debriefings from all of the prisoners who came back from over there sealed, so that you can't even get it through freedom of information. In fact, that
was McCain that did that, you said?
Yep, that was McCain that did that. And one of the POWs told me, he says, I can't even get my own debrief because of what McCain did. So that he buried the situation really well.
And so the last because McCain's grotesque legacy lives on past his own death, because and I want you to kind of tie this little bow around McCain in particular. So if my understanding is correct, the POW families wanted to get some legislation passed that would make it harder for the government to lie to families in current and future wars, so that what happened to families like ours didn't happen again. And it's my understanding that right before that legislation was actually passed, McCain basically went through the bill and gutted it. Can you talk a little bit about that scenario?
What that was the Missing Personnel Act, and the families, the POW family members and the activists spent 6 months of our own time, money, and effort getting this bill put into law. And the bill was passed in January, and I don't remember exactly what year, 1995, I believe, 96. Anyway, it was passed in January, and what it did in the bill is it made it a criminal offense to lie to the family members about their loved ones, and to hold people accountable in the government agencies for lying to the families or anything to do with the POW issue. And it made, there were provisions in there to make it to where the generals had to account for people on the battlefield and what happened to them, like missing, killed, and so on and so forth. So we had it in law for 6 months, and McCain decided that he was going to gut that bill, and he did. He went in the middle of the night, and that's what they do. They go in the middle of the night, and they put provisions or take provisions out on these things. And he gutted that whole bill. So before that happened, a bunch of us family members went up to the House floor, to the Senate building, and we were going to go into Senator McCain's office and see if we could meet with him about this Missing Personnel Act, because it was during the time he was trying to gut it. And as we're standing in the hallway, here he comes out of his office. And so we had a former POW with us, and we had some activists with us and some family members with us. And so he just comes up to us with this great big smile on his face, like, we were tourists and he was going to stop and shake our hands. And so John Parcells, who was the POW in the group, he was going to be our spokesman. So he started off, and he had a very mild, quiet, very passive voice. And he started talking. And as he started talking, you could see John McCain's face turn from white to beet red, to sweat running down the side of his face. And then he just blew up. And then there was a lady there in a wheelchair, and he shoved her aside, and down the hallway he went. So I went after him down the hallway.
Very unlike you, Grandma.
He's going down the hallway, and I'm behind him, and I said, Senator McCain, I said, all we want is you to leave the Missing Personnel Act alone. He said, I don't know Missing Personnel Act. I don't know Missing Personnel Act. So we get to the elevator, the senator's elevators, and he's punched the button, and he's looking for the elevator. And he looks at me and he says, well, you don't know what I've been through. Well, I have a picture of your granddad on my necklace. And I picked it up and I held it up in front of his face. And I said, yes, but David Herdlick is still going through it. And at that point, the elevator doors open. He steps on the elevator and he says, you don't understand. And I said, yeah, I understand. You're a traitor. And at that point, the elevator doors shut. And so I ran downstairs because I thought, well, I'll catch him at the next deal. But he
must go. It's one of that Willy Wonka elevators. They go in like multiple different directions and pop out in ways that you don't know.
No, they have special ways of taking care of that. So
David, mark that quote down. That's going on a shirt. Yes, I understand that you're a traitor. That's going on the shirt. We're gonna sell that on the website, Grandma. I like that one. Yes, I understand you're a traitor.
So I think it's safe to say that this game plan isn't going anywhere. That our family is horrifically ununique in that we aren't the only ones that have gone through this. Exactly. And like we were bringing up before, or making note of, we are about to go, there's multitudes of different families that are about to go through it again with this war and how it was so poorly constructed and handled throughout. So unfortunately, is there any advice or anything that you'd give anybody to potentially hold someone's feet to the fire or make this situation better? What would your expert advice be?
I don't think I have any expert advice. The thing is that the POW issue, or the POW activists, have made some improvements, shall we say, because I noticed during the Gulf War, when somebody was missing, they actually flew over the area with loudspeakers saying, you will not be left behind. You will not be abandoned. So I did see that as something that we had accomplished. And we had one of the Gulf War veterans actually thank the POW community because he was one that was returned. And so we did make a difference. And not that they won't still hide, because they did. Spiker was shot down in Iraq and he didn't come home. And he was a captive, and they blew him off. So, step forward, step back, but you're not going to make the government do anything that they don't want to do. So,
and as we sit here today, because had the Missing Persons Act gone through as drafted by the families and the lawyers or whoever you paid to draft it, current service members who are tomorrow's veterans would have at least some semblance of protection. in terms of their families not being lied to. But as we sit here today, because of the gutting of that bill, basically families that are sending their children off to wars today, they're young men, sending them off to war today, have no more protection than Grandpa did in 1965. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. Because the government agencies are allowed to lie and deny, and that is a normal thing for them.
And so obviously there's no criminal penalties because that's what he gutted. But what does the Missing Persons Act do, if any? I mean, obviously, probably not much. That's the whole reason why he gutted it. But like, is there anything to hold people's feet to the fire if they lie to family members?
Nope, absolutely not. Because that is the thing that we found over the years. What they did, like for instance, let's say that you had a family member that was in covert activities, and that he was sent to target A. But you were told he was at target B. So when you would send in a FOIA of information, Freedom of Information Act, asking for all of the data for point B concerning your husband or your brother or whatever, they would say there is nothing there. But had you known that he was at target A, you could have sent the Freedom of Information Act in and gotten the information. That is part of the way they do it. It's like the pea under the shell, and they keep moving it around. And the other thing they do is if you send in a Freedom of Information Act and you don't put it specifically correctly, if you put a the or an a where it's not supposed to be, they can deny you for that too. Because I sent in a Freedom of Information Act asking for all the reports showing that David had tried to escape, and they sent back and said that there were none. Well, then later years, we found all these documents that stated that he tried to escape. And so there you are. But because I didn't form it just correctly. Well, I used the word duck soup. Well, duck soup, as it turns out, was a CIA-run, operation. And it was multitasked operation. Like one day they'd be kicking out rice to the Hmong. The next day they would be flying the prince around. The next day they would be out doing escape things. And so because I said rescue attempts, and it was not rescue attempts, it was a multifaceted thing, I was denied that. And there were years later, I was still getting documents on duck soup. And one of them had your granddad's name on it, plain as day, in an escape attempt. So I was never given that document.
And so what year did you ask for that document? And then what year did you actually get it through separate channels?
Well, I never did get it. Yes, Roger Hall found it in the library, LBJ library down in Texas is where they were. That's the other thing. And you go looking for documents, say you go to the archives, well, they have strung these documents all over the country. Like some of them are in the Library of Congress. Some of them are down there in the Vietnam, the Texas Tech Vietnam era archives. Some of them are in the LBJ library. And so when you send in a Freedom of Information to the CIA, they say, well, we have no documents of that because they file them out to other places. I mean, it's totally the pea under the shell, and the families have fought for years trying to get these documents.
And what, they keep these documents only in physical form in some random file and folder around the country? Like it's 2021 and they haven't managed to create a centralized database with keyword searches that they can find it and stuff like that?
No, absolutely not. They do not make it easy. And that's like I was at the Library of Congress when the DPMO, which was the Department of POW-MIA at one time, was sending documents over because they were supposed to declassify documents because the different presidents have written executive orders declassifying POW documents. So this guy, the head of the research department on Vietnam, took us down to the basement and showed us how they sent those documents over. They were thrown in cardboard boxes like you would go to the grocery store and get. They were not alphabetized. They were not any form of what do you want to call it? organization. There was no organization to it at all. And so it was going to take those people forever to go through that and put it in a database. But that's their modus operandi.
Yeah. Is just buried under piles and piles of information, never even try to sort through it once.
That's what they do. That's what they do to you too. If you send in a freedom of information, they try to bury
muddy the waters and just
nonsensical
you don't know where you're looking.
stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, like I said, the biggest thing is they deny you because the way you formed the sentence.
Right. And so they're clearly making it as hard for you to even get to the information, let alone when you get to the information, it's just so impossible to find.
Yeah, everything that I've done has been by accident or been by some researcher found it by accident when they were looking for something else.
But they're doing their best, Grandma. They're trying to get Granddad back to us.
Yeah, exactly. They've made a real effort.
Yeah.
So bring us up to current day. I think you mentioned earlier you have one, maybe a couple different lawsuits going related to FOIA and other things like that. So what's the current status of the fight? And where does it stand today?
Well, the way it stands today is Roger Hall, who is a researcher, has a lawsuit against the CIA. And of course, I had tried to hire an attorney years ago. And he told me then, he says, what the government will do is they'll get you in court and they'll stall you and try to run you out of money. And that's basically what they've done to Roger. But they haven't run him out of money. But the thing is, we can't get any judge that'll stand up to the CIA. And that's the problem that you have. And but we have gotten a few little documents out of there, but nothing like there is. And I don't know that the CIA will ever give them up.
Yeah.
And that's where David's documents will be, as being the CIA, because the CIA is the one that ran the war in Laos.
And so that one lawsuit that you mentioned, that is basically where you have a couple different FOIA requests pending and stuff like that because they haven't responded to them. Is that basically what that lawsuit's about?
Well, now there are two lawsuits. One is the one against the CIA, and the other one is the one that John Clark filed for FOIA information, which is freedom of information, that has shown that there are some documents. So now he's got to try to get those documents. Of course, they're using the COVID as a reason that they can't let you come in and they can't get the documents because they're all dealing with COVID now.
Which, again, would not be an issue if they had a centralized database that you could search from any computer anywhere.
You could search it from home. But the whole modus operandi of this whole Vietnam thing is to make it so convoluted that it is so difficult to get the documents. And they're just waiting for all the POWs to die. And I think as soon as all the POWs die, then the documents will be out there. They'll release them because then they won't have to worry.
The problem's solved.
Which begs the question: how would they know when all the POWs are dead?
Well, that's just
they know where they're at.
In that document that the researcher found years ago, it states right in there in that meeting in the White House in 1981. Where the Vietnamese have offered 57 POWs, down at the bottom of the letter, there's a little note written, and it says, DIA knows where they are and who they are. So that tells me... And
that letter was dated what year?
1981. So they've been tracking the POWs all along, because that's... I found a couple of documents in the Library of Congress in the mid-1980s where they were tracking them, and they said that they're moving them here. You need to follow them over there and see where they're taking them. So the whole thing is the U.S. government has known the whole time where they are and who they are.
Well,
that makes it even worse.
Yeah. On that cheery note, Grandma.
I think this might have been one of the most depressing conversations we ever had, Grandma, but I've been so happy to see your smiling face.
But and it definitely put meat on the bones because, as our longtime listeners know, and if you're a new listener and this is your first episode, you definitely go back and listen to episode 0, where David and I kind of talk about the way we see the world, which is largely colored by this family experience. When you have this type of experience from cradle to the grave, you develop a healthy distrust of the authorities. And as you have been able to tell throughout this story, these authorities have done. It would be better if the authorities had done nothing throughout this entire scenario instead of
or been
actively
ignorant.
working. Yeah,
or been ignorant during the entire thing.
Instead of actively working to thwart the efforts of family members like our grandmother. But where should people go, Grandma, if they want more information, not only on Grandpa's story, but just on the wider POW issue? What are some resources that you would direct people to get more informed about this particular issue?
A lot of the documents are being sent to Texas Tech. They're doing a database on the Vietnam era of the war and everything, but the archives. But the thing is, they're hard to research. In the Library of Congress, they have documents up there, but I have not been able to figure out how to get the most current live sighting reports at the Library of Congress. Like I said, they don't make it easy. They don't make a database where you can just go and click on it and say live sighting reports 2010 and just go right there. You have to dig and I haven't found the way to find them yet on the Library of Congress, but those are some of the sources.
Do you personally have a place where you've kind of collected the documents that you've been able to get your hands on over the years?
Like I said, the researcher, he found some, and I found some at the Library of Congress. Like I said, but had another POW activist friend that he got the live sighting reports out of the Library of Congress. But he's since passed away, so I don't know how to get there because I've tried to go up there and find live sighting reports, but it's just convoluted. I can't find it.
Yeah.
But I know they're there. It's just a question of how do you find them, and maybe somebody that's really computer savvy could find them.
What about the website, powherdlicka.com?
Oh, no, they can go to the website and find out all about your granddad's case. It's POW Herdlicka, HRDLICKA.com, and they can find out all about your granddad's case on that. And I put some documents up there that I've found over the years. So if they really want to do some research, they can go read documents.
So basically, in any of the documents that you have directly referenced throughout this talk that you've gotten your hands on over the years, are they pretty much all located at that website?
Yeah, they're pretty much there.
And are there links to like other organizations like the actual POW MIA organization and stuff like that on there?
No, I don't have any links to any other organizations because the only other organization people go to is the National League of Families, which is a part of the U.S. government that'll just give you
they're a co-opted institution.
Right. Okay.
Non-information, and they won't give you the truth. They'll just give you the government side of the story. So stay away from the National League of Families.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, Grandma. Well, I think that's pretty much the whole story. I'm sure there's going to be a flood of questions when people listen to this episode, and so when they do hit us with any questions, maybe they have some more information about, you and Grandpa together, the beginning part of the story, or maybe there was some other follow-up questions where they say, well, you guys talked about this and can we get some more information? You think we could get you back on for another episode to answer those questions when they come flowing in?
A rapid fire Q&A session.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll do a Q&A session.
All right, Grandma. Well, you're a real gem for doing this episode, Grandma.
Well, thank you.
This 2 Ponyaks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing it. Okay. Love you both.
We love you too, Grandma.
Love you too, Grandma.
Okay. Bye-bye.
We'll speak to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So we hope that you enjoyed that little discussion with Grandma. Again, she's a gem, and we're just happy that we were able to share her with the world.
And we have no bias one way or another.
No.
We could take her or leave her. We had no opinions on her before we did that.
However, our grandma could definitely beat up your grandma. Yeah. I'm just saying.
She's so much cooler.
Just throwing it out there.
Anyway.
So where can you find this episode? You can find us at wmdpodcast.com/60. But like we said, if you didn't press pause in the beginning like we told you to, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, that's very libertarian of you, and we appreciate it.
You little rebel, you.
Third of all, go back now and listen to episode 0. which was the last origin story, Grandpa's story in our words. So you can find us there. You can also find us at YouTube, WMD, or search Weapons of Immune Destruction. You can also find us on any podcast app you can possibly think of. Spotify, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, all the good ones. And other than that, just find us on our social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or just Google us Weapons of Immune Destruction. Link up us with wherever you find us, and come back next week for episode 61.